What is up, everyone? Our last video was basically giving you an update on what has been happening since we started this channel 4 years ago. We also sent out a newsletter. In that newsletter, we asked what y'all would like to hear more about from us. And the biggest poll, the biggest percentage went to what does and doesn't work between us as a polyamorous partnership. If we're going to talk about this, we have to talk about the structure of our dynamic. Like, you're new here, you don't know who we are and what we do and who we've been to each other. We are Bear and Fifi. We are a polyamorous cutie BIPOC couple from New York City, born and raised. We started a mission and we started work that centers working with other people and their relationships, both on like a private coaching level and in education and events. All of our work is rooted in radical relating, and this radical relationship runs that journey together. Starting there, what we're working with, and now we're going to talk about what doesn't work within those parameters. Starting with what doesn't work, so we can give you some hope about what does, because a lot does work here. I think the first point of what doesn't work, and we'll talk about why, this point really surprises most couples, right? They're like, what do you mean? Because we are so taught the opposite of what I'm about to say, which is that when Fifi and I prioritize erotic intimacy and romance as like the kind of pinnacle of our dynamic, doesn't work. We are life partners, which to most, like in culture and dominant culture, we're taught that your life partner is the person that you're supposed to have this very like intense romantic and erotic bond with, as alongside, you know, all the other life that you decide to do with each other. And that doesn't work for us. When we center that, the way we show up for each other starts to change, and it starts to challenge our ability to show up as family, as comrades, and as life partners, people who are doing tangible life together on a day-to-day basis. The reason why we chose to do life together is because of a connection, not because like, oh, this is convenient. Because our life is not convenient, just so we're clear. The centering of like individual pleasure in romantic partnership and like the nuclear family, like all those things, I'm sorry. It is very okay to want them, unless you make it so. They're not sacred within capitalism. These feed a machine. When we center it in that way, which we're all privy to doing randomly, like we haven't been focusing on our pleasure and our erotic and romantic life, the urgency around it starts to create a lot of tension, and we also start to like lose out on who we actually started off with each other, which was really rooted in camaraderie and companionship and spiritual camaraderie and companionship. And yes, we had really good sex. That's how we started, for sure, at a play party. And that was somehow still not the basis of our dynamic.
Right.
Like, that was not how we began relating. Even with that as a big part of our relationship, we created space. We like had a lot of protocol to move at a pace that centered way more than that. So when we moved in together, it became a different dance. Like, it was a lot easier to center all the other things in our life, living apart, and also using the time we spent together to like engage in romance and intimacy as well. It was sacred in the sense because we weren't chasing it all the time. It was intentional, it was curated, and then we also worked on so many parts of our life. When we moved in together and started to have this high focus on it, it created a lot of tension because we did not want to be that to each other in that way, like that we're this high focal point of romance and erotic intimacy because of so many elements, a lot of it also having to do with each of our own individual trauma and the way that we have to relate. But that prioritization, as much as like so many like in models for like getting a relationship back and the honeymoon, like all these things, really does emphasize like when you retrieve romance and erotic intimacy again, your relationship is not successful, right? Like, you have a successful long-term dynamic, and that is just not the case for us. That does not make our relationship more successful. It actually creates tension that doesn't need to exist between us.
It's almost as if it's anything we feel urgency around. We know that this doesn't work for us because we go through the process of testing whether it will, because it's very much in our nature, exactly how you said. Like, of course, we're going to lean towards these things that feel like solutions. And it's always a very humbling process to reach and to seek and to want to find a place that feels good. But that process can reveal a lot. It tends to, with us, unearth the insecurities and the fears, which create ways of behaving that just end up teaching us a lot, because those things that are ignited in the process, and like the ways we bump heads and the times that we try and it doesn't work, all of that can be really frustrating and discouraging. And ultimately, it's like when we finally get to have the space to notice how we've been approaching it with that anxiousness and like urgency, really, that really has been the little annoying leprechaun that we have to constantly keep an eye out for, because it is super insidious and it is very counterintuitive to like go against that. That's the first thing that like I would say just doesn't generally work, especially in intimate dynamics. Wanting something too badly.
Well, typically wanting something too badly is attached to like a pretty like long narrative or agenda, or you know, and we are kind of taught that romance and erotic intimacy and like finding this like connection is going to be the thing that heals the love that we need to kind of like save the world and our wounds. No, that's not true. And it's great and it's beautiful and it can be sacred and it can be all of these things, but for us, for it to remain kind of sacred and untouched, it is to not be so kind of like this ingredient has to exist for this partnership to exist.
Right.
And that is just not true, like literally not true, because of all the other partnerships that we have within it. But yeah, anything approached with that kind of urgency leads us to really strange behaviors towards each other, and we forget how to be friends, we forget how to hold space emotionally, because so much is wrapped in, and like even it starts to seep into emotional intimacy and what that's supposed to look like, because we're not in, it becomes a mess, and like we stop being able to show up to our emotional intimacy as family, as friends, as people who are not, I don't know, like romance is so hot that it takes the warmth out, or it can take the warmth out of a connection. But this is like largely like what has caused, like in our last de-escalation back in the day when we, you know, called off the engagement, like all these things, was this hyper focus on exclusivity around romance and romantic love, which really blew up in our faces.
It's also a great example of the nature of jealousy, and in the body feels very similar to this urgency. And explore it for yourself, what that relationship is, because that sense is one of attachment. In my experience and what I've seen with folks struggling with the sense of jealousness is this, I am deserving of this, or I'm entitled to this, and that can just be so heart-wrenching to feel like something should be a certain way and isn't. It requires this kind of stepping back and noticing the beauty of what I already have, to know that I'm not at loss of anything at all. This sense of injustice or feeling entitled to something, feeling like I have to fight for it or feel angry for it to come towards me, is the opposite of how I've had the things I want come to me. It's in the expression of what hurts and like the fear of what I'm losing, and the sharing of that in a vulnerable way that actually gets me closer to that thing, and actually gets me closer to the feeling that I'm ultimately seeking, which is connection.
Right.
Like, what is jealousy other than fearing that I'm not going to have the kind of connection that I so deeply want? Those connections come when we notice all the things that we're already connected to, pouring into what is accessible, setting those intentions. It's okay to want those things and to put that out in desire. It really is kind of about the energy that we approach it. You know, it's a lot of observing of where each one of us is at independently, and then coming together and like trying to make things work in unison, and then, you know, being able to step back and say the way that each of us is approaching this right now is asynchronous, and it's not leading towards the kind of connection that we want. Just that kind of ebb and flow of being able to like fix our own approach to life and whatever is going on and our desires, to be able to like come together in that way of, okay, no, we have the same line of vision. You're not working towards a very specific outcome, and it's not my job to just help you get what you want.
Right.
That's when discord arises a lot, and it's shown up here because of the pace that I tend to move at. I'm like, decisions. That has like created big disconnect here. So those opportunities always present themselves for us to like take a step back and realize, oh yeah, this is like clashing because the way I'm perceiving things, and like I need to fix my energy, basically.
This hyper focus on sex and romance feeds us against the world love and the individual. It's like it is. It's like pleasure centered Western kind of like ideologies of, you know, the way that we are supposed to find meaning and connection to the world is through finding our like one true love, which is also like monogamy, like all those things kind of play into it, and jealousy really works well, like feeds on this like entitlement to exclusivity. There is this like, that was mine and now you're giving it to someone else, or not even worse, you're not giving it to me. Issues of romance and erotic intimacy come up even when there's no like if it's not happening at all. Right, there's like this sense of like, well, this is supposed to be happening, and it's like, well, who says that it's supposed to be happening? Because you want it to? And like then dropping deeper, like, why do you want it to? Can you find a sense of like connection and like separating pleasure from intimacy and connection, right? Or can I find a sense of connection outside of romance and erotic intimacy in this moment, because it's not accessible with all the life that we share together? There are different things that need to be prioritized by the day. Going from that, talking about the next thing that doesn't work for us is a lack of privacy, discretion, discernment. Again, another thing that might raise an eyebrow for couples, like I tell my partner everything and blah, blah, and this and that, and they can just walk into my room and like whatever it is, they like maybe not even have separate bedrooms to walk into. We, for some reason, only owe our romantic partner all of the information or like every feeling that we're going through, and they also owe it to us to always be able to hold it. Why is that the case? This hyper focus on the most healed a human can be is the ability to be vulnerable about their feelings and vice versa, and share every just like thought or feeling process that you're going through. I'm like reaching for connection that is premature, honestly, because I'm feeling anxious or urgent. I need to know every step of this process so I can protect myself. And that's not connection. That is protection. That's like where I'm moving from when I'm in that energy, when I'm berating Fifi, whose feelings move miles slower than mine in terms of processing, to tell me what they're feeling by the moment. Checking myself, like, why do I need this amount of information? Obviously, moving with compassion and being able to hold feelings. I'm autistic, I have CPTSD, predictability, like these things, rigidity, like I confront them on the day-to-day. But there's a difference between recognizing like this is something I'm confronting on the day-to-day and working through, or like accommodating, versus you owe me this because I need to feel safe. You owe me clarity on your process that is unclear and driving you nuts, right? Or you're having a hard time moving through it, but I need it to be clear to me now. I'm not saying like privacy in the sense of being sneaky and weird. I'm saying like giving ourselves and our partners and our loved ones a chance to go through their own process without having to like step in, because it's not about me. It is not always about me, and yes, it's going to impact me. Welcome to the world of like human relationships. I'm not going to know everything that my partner is going through, and because a lot of the time my partner is not going to always know what they're going through as they're moving through it. Same as me. Bursting this idea that my person is the person I tell everything to. And I'm if it works for y'all, that's great. Like relationships that are like that, that is amazing and beautiful. And because what happens when you're in conflict, you're supposed to be wearing every hat for me right now. You're my nesting partner, you are the mother of our cat, you are my business partner, and you're supposed to be able to hold my feelings. You're now my mother. It causes chaos. Like it causes sheer emotional dysregulation between us. Center a little bit and what we're actually talking about in this moment, versus like this anxiety of like, I need to know everything before we even find a solution.
That is the cultural norm, is to be so enmeshed and embedded and telepathically connected, and those things are still true.
Right.
It's just the commitment to constantly also noticing when it's charging us to feel that sense of urgency, and basically the commitment to respond to that awareness with the knowing that, as counterintuitive as it might feel, to just let the partner do their thing and have their process, that will ultimately reap the greatest results in connection. I want this, and it's like that energy that is getting in the way of the contact and the intimacy that ultimately is really what I want.
All of it has to do with, like, I want to feel more connected to my partner, and these are the ways I know how. And we have been steered in really strange directions as like a dominant culture on how to cultivate reconnection again, which is largely like, do you want the honeymoon phase back? Like, there's already so much enmeshment that, like, if we're not giving each other some emotional privacy to just have our own experiences, it's like, Jesus, man, you are everywhere. Like, I'm just trying to, like...
Right? Yeah. That way of being in close relation, as much as that's all the information I have, I know from having the privilege of being in this relationship that has challenged that constantly, that is not really how to cultivate the intimacy that I crave. Even though media, my family, everything around me seems to lie to me every day and tell me that it's the opposite.
When I'm so hyper-focused on what Fifi's process is, I'm not paying attention to my other relationships. I'm not paying attention to my work. I'm not paying attention to a larger mission of how I want to be in the world and how I want to impact the world. I'm just kind of like wrapped up in what Sophia's not telling me. And not telling me like literally lying like a big truth, but literally like not at the pace of where I want them to be with like clarity around their feelings and decisions and choices. Yeah. That preoccupation like takes me so far away from what actually makes me feel grounded in the world, which is not romance and erotic. Like it has never been, right? It has always been collective care and community and friendship, nature, and then this kind of dessert thing.
And seeing it that way is what makes this feel like it will last forever.
Going off of that, moving into that positive light, what works here?
Tantric lifestyle, it's,
spirituality, space,
constant recommitment, routine.
And I think it's important to emphasize like what we mean by spirituality. For everyone to kind of like not hear spirituality and be like, ugh. We mean like something bigger, as in like the collective. When I'm rooted in caring about something outside of my own comfort, needs, and pleasure, which is still important.
Still medicine.
It's still medicine. It's still a part of like joy as an act of resistance, like all of those things. And when I feel connected to the world around me, not just like the isolated us against the world dynamic, but when I feel connected to the meaning of like why I want to be here, which is literally just to make the world a better place, right? By like people engaging with me or interacting with me, I feel grounded. And like when I'm preoccupied with pleasure and romance, I'm not grounded in that. I really am not, because I'm like lack. I don't have it, right? And that is such a weird energy to move through the world in. But a lot of us do.
That sense of groundedness like takes a long time to develop, and one that I would say that's really the invitation here is for you and for me to continue to explore that feeling and build a familiarity to it. Groundedness, centeredness, being in my body, cultivating that is the most uncomfortable thing I've ever had to go through. I'm even getting emotional talking about it. So go forth and do that, because it's uncomfortable, but it builds closeness.
It does. I know that our relationship honestly can look like, this is a Buddy Wakefield quote, but like Octopus Inc. to the rest of the world. We work really hard to be together and to be here. This idea like we don't owe each other anything. We actually owe each other a lot. And it's just not the things we've been taught that we owe each other, which is like sex and our bodies and like every secret we've ever lived with. Like,
right.
Instead, like what we owe each other is a sense of solidarity, of like camaraderie and companionship. And like when we center that, the play is also really hot when we like give it some space. We have had the privilege of being together for 7 years, of growing up together, of starting off at a root of like a radical kind of ideology of how we're going to relate to each other, and has given us a lot of room because there's a lot of trust. We have not put our relationship to the test. That has been our entire kind of way of relating, is learning what does and doesn't work and leaning into what we learn. The love here is so much more than when erotic intimacy and romance aren't accessible, when the like romance dies and Fifi has to leave to go take care of like their family and I have to hold it down. Like there's so many things that we need to tap into instead, because romance is not going to save us through life. The like sheer kind of relentlessness of life.
Romance is the bonus.
It's just the bonus.
Just the bonus.
We really have to remind ourselves to honor and reset. And that's kind of like, we're at a reset point right now of taking space in a way that's really, truly so loving, because we recognize like, oh, we did it again, didn't we? We're getting in that dance.
It's counterintuitive, it's scary. It's not what is told to us. It's not what we are often instructed to do. But we are here to testify that it works a lot better. Thanks for tuning in, watching this far, and if you want to keep following us, subscribe, blah, 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 all those things, follow.
They get it. You was crying, like, you know.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.